Hi, my name is Jeff Rohne, and I'm a volunteer here at the Historical Museum of St. James-Assiniboia. A few months ago, I was asked by Benita Hunter Eastwood, who is the executive director and curator here at the museum, to see if I could build a platform for a display. And this is the display behind me here, and that's the platform here that I built during the month of August of this year. I guess the challenge that was given to me was to try to create a platform that represented as best we could the period that this furniture stood in the house here in the St. James area. The home of Lord Strathcona, Donald A. Smith. I think he was the guy that put the last spike in the railroad of the CNR. But anyway, I'm a woodworker, and so the challenge was to find wood for the platform that would represent the period as best we could. But to start with, I needed to build a platform to fit into this confined space. We had a couple of challenges. One is the angles. There's an angle here and an angle over there, generally square on the back part, though as many of you know, most buildings and homes aren't really square, they're a little off, but this was pretty good. And what I did is I built a base underneath here of construction lumber, fir, and I think there'll be a photo representing that. All the angles become quite obvious when you see that platform base of 2x4s, sort of the substructure. Over top of that, I then installed underflooring of 5/8 inch plywood to give a flat surface for the wood on top. And then finally, I installed the flooring here. Now, regarding the flooring, because budgets are tight, we wanted to find lumber at an economical price and lumber that represented the period. And so I went on Kijiji, and I found a posting there for what I thought was the appropriate lumber for this particular project. However, when I went to see the lumber, it was in the north part of Winnipeg, the gentleman who had some of that lumber, he had measured the lumber thickness. We were looking for boards that were approximately 3.5 to 4 inches wide, which would be representative of the period. But he did say that he did have a pile of lumber in another location from a house that he renovated about a year or two ago. And it was sitting outdoors in the backyard of this other house. So I went there with him, and I found this lumber. Now, it was in 16-foot lengths, but the width was quite appropriate. The material itself is Douglas fir, which is not a premium wood for flooring in homes of that period, and might more have been used in the kitchen or in the upstairs where general public didn't really see it. In those days, the wood used in floors in the homes of some quality would have been premium woods on the first floor and not so premium woods on the second floor because the public wouldn't go there. In fact, my home was built in 1928, and the same is the case for my house. The wood was in pretty bad shape, the floorboards, so I had to clean it up and plane it down, and then installed it, and you'll see a photo in this offering that shows you that. And then I was stained to darken it because I had to plane it down to get some of the grime and crud that was on there from being outside in the rain and snow and whatever for a couple of years, I think. And then I stained it and then I varnished it to give it a bit of protection and a bit of sheen, as you can see now. Not too much, but enough. It's quite rustic looking, and I think it turned out quite well. Now, the interesting thing that I uncovered when I picked up this wood and started working with it is that it was indeed very old wood. And how do I know it's very old? Well, I'll show you. This wood here, I would estimate, is somewhere between 100, maybe 120 years old. Maybe a little less, a little more. And I know that because of the, well, first of all, it's taken out of a house in the north part of Winnipeg that was probably built in 1910, maybe 1900. If you look at the end of the wood here, you can see these are the rings of the wood, the end of the tree trunk. And see how close together they are. Well, how close? Well, here's a piece of modern wood, same species, but likely harvested, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. And see how far apart they are, those rings. So they're far apart because this tree was harvested as second or third growth, whereas this tree was harvested in the late 1800s, somewhere in Alberta or BC, because it's Douglas fir, which doesn't grow around here, and it was shipped here. So this one had to fight for its life amongst a very well-developed forest, and therefore grew very slowly. Now, why is this important? Well, this particular wood is denser, stronger, and less prone to expansion and contraction, whereas this wood is not quite as stable and a little bit more prone to movement and a little bit softer. Not terribly noticeable, but you can see certainly the difference. Now, another thing about the wood that I found interesting is that the modern wood and this wood were cut from different parts of their respective trees. And so how do I know that? See, this is approximately 45-degree angle, and this is pretty much a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to illustrate how this wood here, which is on this floor here, was cut out of a tree, and how this one was cut out of a tree, obviously different trees. So I'll show you with a bit of a diagram. Pardon my artwork. So we have an end of a tree trunk, and you can see that the rings are as they were, a little bit too symmetrical because I used a compass, but this tree had a healthy growth. Typically, when you go to a home hardware store, like a do-it-yourself store, like, well, I won't name them, but the big box stores, you will get what is called flat sawn lumber. So they just take the tree and they just cut down the tree, and you get sort of flat sawn here. So you can see the rings are flatter, and here they're a little bit more like 45s. But for this kind of wood, what they did is they took the log and they cut this way in the middle to get these 45-degree angles, and then they did the same thing here. They cut another one. So they'd get maybe 2 or 3 boards this way and 2 or 3 boards this way, depending on the diameter of the tree and how thick they wanted to cut the pieces. Usually they'd cut them about 1.25 inches thick. So that's called quarter sawn. Why? Because it's on the quarters, right? And they're approximately 90 degrees. Flat sawn is typically less than 45, and again, depending on the size of the log. Rift sawn is sort of halfway between quarter sawn and flat sawn, where the angle of the rings to the flatness of the board is roughly 45 degrees. So let's go back to our pieces, and basically you can see that this is rift sawn and this is quarter sawn, but neither of them are flat sawn, which is good because flat sawn is prone to cupping and twisting. So the most stable of the woods is this one here, and by and large, most of these boards are quarter sawn. So that was kind of interesting for me to uncover, and therefore allowed me to kind of explain this to you, maybe a little bit more detail than you really wanted to hear about wood, but I'm a woodworker, and woodworking is all about understanding wood, because wood moves, it behaves, it's not like steel, it will expand and contract with the seasons, and you need to know about the different kinds of woods and how they would behave. So they would use this kind of wood, rift sawn or quarter sawn, mainly quarter sawn, because they could afford it in those days. There was lots of wood. They thought, hey, it's never going to run out, but of course it did. And nowadays you're lucky to get rift sawn. So that's it, the making of the floor and the display. It's a wonderful display, and I hope you enjoyed my discussion. Thank you.